At my wedding, my sister grabbed the mic and yelled, "She's not even graduated, she lied on her resume." My boss looked horrified and muttered, "That's why your pitch fell off." My mother covered her face. I took a deep breath, pulled out my laptop, and said, "Wanna see the emails she sent pretending to be me?" Last year at my wedding, my younger sister Savannah grabbed the microphone during the reception and, completely out of nowhere, shouted that I had lied on my resume and didn't even graduate college. My boss, who was sitting 2 tables away, looked horrified. I remember hearing him mutter to his wife, "That's why her pitch fell off last week." My mother immediately covered her face with her hands like she was watching a car crash. Nathan, my now husband, squeezed my hand under the table and whispered, "We can leave if you want." But I didn't leave. I stood up, walked calmly to the DJ table, pulled out my laptop from behind the speakers, plugged it into the projector, and asked the room, "Wanna see the email Savannah sent pretending to be me?" What followed tore my family apart, but also in a strange, painful way set me free. My name is Marissa Gallagher. I'm 29, living in San Francisco, and married to Nathan, the best person I know. I work at a marketing firm, Bellwether Strategies, and I built my career from scratch. No handouts, no shortcuts. Just grit and long nights and sheer stubbornness. But family? That's a different story. I grew up in Newtown, Pennsylvania, one of those picturesque towns with pretty main streets, endless gossip, and secrets stuffed into every crack. My parents, Patricia and Ronan, were the kind of people who looked fine from the outside but were crumbling from the inside out. Dad was a plumber with a drinking problem. Mom was a stay-at-home expert at passive aggression. Then there was Savannah. 2 years younger. Golden child. Always had a way of making herself the center of every room. Prettier in that effortless way, with sun-streaked hair and a wildness that people mistook for charm when we were kids. By the time we were teenagers, I knew that Savannah could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. And me? I could do no right. Still, I didn't spend my life fighting for their attention. I worked. I studied. I saved every penny and bolted the moment I could. Full scholarship, full course load, 2 jobs. I was going to build a different life. And for a while, it felt like I did. When Nathan proposed, it was like another little victory. He was the opposite of the people I grew up with, steady, kind, loyal. His family welcomed me with open arms. We decided on a vineyard wedding outside Napa, somewhere beautiful, somewhere fresh, somewhere far away from Newtown. I sent the invites with a pit in my stomach when it came to my side of the family, but Nathan insisted. "It's just one day," he said. "Then it's our life." The warning signs started early. Savannah didn't RSVP to the bridal shower. Then she showed up an hour late to the rehearsal dinner wearing a full-length, blindingly white dress. She made a point of hugging Nathan too long, laughing too loudly at his jokes, and brushing past me like I was a coat rack. When I pulled her aside and said, "Savannah, seriously white at a wedding event?" she just smirked and said, "Relax, Riss. No one's looking at me." I wanted to believe it was just immaturity. I told myself it didn't matter. That after the wedding, I could put thousands of miles between us again. The wedding day started off perfect. Clear skies. Soft breeze. Nathan crying as I walked down the aisle. For the first time in years, I felt safe. Like I had finally built something nobody could touch. The reception was beautiful. Speeches were heartfelt. Our first dance was clumsy and sweet, and everyone laughed when Nathan nearly tripped on my dress. My heart was full. And then the microphone screeched, and Savannah's voice slurred out. "She's not even graduated. She lied on her resume." The words hung in the air like smoke. At first, people thought it was a joke. There was an awkward titter of laughter. But then they saw her face flushed, drunk, triumphant, and the room turned cold. I looked over and saw Melissa, my boss, frozen halfway through a sip of wine. Her husband leaned in, and I heard him whisper, "That's why her pitch fell off last week." Melissa's face twisted in something like disgust. My mother sat stone still, hands covering her face. Nathan squeezed my hand under the table. For a second, everything inside me screamed to run. Hide. Cry. But something colder took over. I stood up, walked to the DJ table, and grabbed my laptop. Thank God I had it there to manage the backup playlist. I plugged it into the venue's projector, heart hammering so loudly it drowned out the room's whispers. I pulled up my old Gmail account, the one Savannah had somehow hacked months ago. I opened the folder where I had saved the evidence. "Want to see the emails she sent pretending to be me?" I asked the room. One by one, I showed them. The forged transcripts. The fake job references. The emails Savannah had sent HR at Bellwether, posing as me, weaving lies so tangled it almost made me nauseous looking at them. Every email was timestamped. Every lie was traceable. As I clicked through them, a ripple of shock spread across the guests. I caught glimpses Melissa's mouth tight with anger, Nathan's mother shaking her head in disbelief, my father turning purple with rage. Savannah just stood there, swaying slightly, face draining of color. Finally, Dad stood up, walked over, grabbed Savannah roughly by the elbow, and hauled her outside. My mother rushed after them, her heels clattering on the dance floor. I closed the laptop. Nathan stood up beside me. Without a word, he wrapped an arm around my shoulders. We stayed like that for a few minutes, the party unraveling around us, until someone turned the music back on, awkwardly loud. The rest of the night was a blur. Some guests left early. Some stayed and drank harder, pretending everything was fine. Melissa didn't say much, but before she left, she squeezed my hand and said, "Monday. We'll talk Monday." At least she didn't say "you're fired." When Nathan and I finally got back to our hotel, I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my dress, staring at the floor. Nathan knelt in front of me and said, "Whatever happens, we're in this together." I believed him. The next morning, instead of boarding our honeymoon flight to Italy, we packed up and drove to Big Sur. Nathan said the ocean would help. I wasn't so sure, but when we pulled off Highway 1 and stood at the cliff's edge, watching the waves smash the rocks below, something inside me cracked open. Nathan sat next to me on the hood of the rental car, passing a bottle of water back and forth. "You don't have to fix them, you know," he said quietly. "I know," I whispered. I wish it didn't have to be like this." He bumped my shoulder with his. "You didn't break it." I didn't answer. I wasn't sure if I believed him yet. When we got back to San Francisco, everything got worse before it got better. When we got back to San Francisco, it felt like stepping back into the wreckage of a life I thought I had secured. Bellwether Strategies, the company where I had built my career from the ground up, was already swirling with quiet rumors. I could feel it the second I walked into the Monday morning meeting, the glances, the too careful smiles, the slight stiffening of shoulders when I walked past. Melissa called me into her office after the meeting. Her expression was professional, but softer than I expected. She gestured for me to sit. "We need to do a review," she said, hands folded neatly on the desk. HR flagged some inconsistencies after the events this weekend. She didn't say wedding. She didn't have to. I nodded. "I understand." And I did. I wasn't angry. I was just tired. I spent the next 4 days gathering every shred of evidence I could. My real diploma. Emails from professors. Employment contracts. Copies of transcripts with embossed seals. Letters of recommendation. I had to dig through old boxes and online archives, nights spent hunched over the kitchen table while Nathan silently passed me cups of tea I barely touched. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed nonstop. My mother sent long, rambling texts alternating between blaming me and begging me to call her. Savannah posted vague status updates on Facebook about betrayal and loyalty, accompanied by Bible verses that made my stomach churn. Distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly felt entitled to an explanation. I ignored all of it. By Friday, I sat in the HR office, a neat stack of papers in front of me. I laid everything out without emotion. I explained the situation. Showed the digital trail of Savannah's fake emails. Presented the notarized statements from my university confirming my graduation. Melissa watched silently through most of it. At the end, she leaned back in her chair and rubbed her temples. "I believe you," she said. Her voice sounded tired, but resolute. "I'm sorry you had to go through this." There was a pause, and then she added, almost like an afterthought, "You handled yourself with integrity. That says more about you than any transcript ever could." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. HR cleared me officially the following Monday. Not just cleared, Melissa promoted me 2 months later to senior strategy consultant. It felt surreal, the way disaster had somehow turned into opportunity. Like the world was trying to balance itself out, even if it still felt broken inside me. At home, Nathan celebrated with takeout and a bottle of champagne, but I couldn't bring myself to toast. There was no sense of victory. Only exhaustion. Family was supposed to be safe. It was supposed to be where you ran when everything else burned. But what happens when the fire starts at home? I didn't have an answer yet. Savannah didn't stop, of course. She sent a letter about 3 months after the wedding, a real paper letter, which somehow made it worse. It started with an apology. "I didn't mean to ruin your life," she wrote. "I just wanted a piece of it. You always had everything. Even when it looked like I did." She said she was sorry. That she missed me. That she wished things could go back to how they were. But there was no ownership. No real acknowledgement of what she had done, that she had tried to destroy my career, my reputation, my life. It read like a plea for forgiveness without any real remorse. I folded the letter neatly and tucked it into a drawer I rarely opened. Around the same time, my father called. A brief, gruff conversation where he told me he had kicked Savannah out after catching her stealing from them. He didn't offer many details, but for the first time in my life, I heard something like regret in his voice. "I'm sorry we didn't protect you," he said. I didn't know what to say back, so I just said, "Thanks for calling." It was a start, maybe. Or it was just noise. I didn't know anymore. Nathan and I slowly built a new rhythm. Less about celebrating milestones, more about finding small, steady places where it was safe to breathe. Weekend trips up the coast. Late-night walks through the Marina District. Silent breakfasts where the only sound was the clink of coffee mugs. Therapy helped. So did distance. I learned to grieve the family I thought I had, not the one that actually existed. It's a strange kind of mourning, losing people who are still alive. Sometimes at night, I'd still dream about the wedding. The white lights strung through the vineyard trees. The music. The feeling, just before Savannah spoke, that maybe finally I was free. And then her voice would cut through the dream like a blade. "She's not even graduated." She lied. I'd wake up with my heart racing, the sheets tangled around my legs, Nathan's hand reaching for mine without even waking up fully. In the weeks that followed, the distance between me and my family became an open wound that everyone pretended not to see. My mother sent a few more texts, increasingly frantic. At first, they were apologetic. Then defensive. Then blaming. It was as if she cycled through every stage of grief without ever landing on acceptance. "You don't just abandon family, Marissa," one said. "You're breaking your mother's heart," another warned. "You need to forgive. Blood is blood." Every message felt like another small betrayal. Another reminder that no matter how much proof I had, no matter how obvious Savannah's cruelty had been, my mother would always side with her. Always. I didn't respond. I couldn't. There was nothing left to say. Savannah, for her part, stayed quiet for a while. Or at least, she stayed quiet to me. I knew from friends back home that she was spinning her own version of the story. In her telling, I had set her up, made her look bad at the wedding, humiliated her out of jealousy. It was exhausting hearing about it secondhand, but not surprising. Newtown was small. Gossip traveled fast, especially when it was poisoned with self-pity and half-truths. Nathan suggested blocking them all: my mother, Savannah, even the extended relatives who started chiming in from the sidelines. "You don't have to keep bleeding for people who sharpen the knives," he said one night, curled beside me on the couch. I knew he was right. I just hadn't figured out how to do it yet. Not really. At work, things steadied. Melissa, true to her word, treated me with nothing but professionalism and cautious kindness. Some coworkers were standoffish at first, but when they saw I wasn't falling apart, that I was still sharp, still committed, most of them warmed back up. There was a scar where the trust had been, but I learned to live with it. Nathan and I spent weekends building a little side business, a marketing consultancy aimed at small, women-owned startups. It was Nathan's idea, a way to reclaim something for ourselves. We spent long nights hunched over laptops, eating bad takeout, brainstorming names and logos. It was the kind of partnership I had always dreamed of. Easy. Honest. Safe. Still, the ache of family lingered like a bruise. One Saturday, months after the wedding disaster, a package arrived at our apartment. No return address. Nathan found it outside the door, handed it to me without a word. Inside was a photo album. Our childhood. Savannah and me on the swing set Dad built. Savannah in pigtails, grinning with jelly on her face. Me holding up a perfect spelling test, beaming. Halloween costumes. Christmas mornings. Endless summers at the lake. There was no note. No explanation. Just the album. I sat there for a long time, flipping through the pages. It hurt, more than I wanted to admit. It would have been easier if there were no good memories. If it was all bad, all poisonous. But it wasn't. There were moments, real, beautiful ones, tangled up with all the damage. Nathan sat down beside me, saying nothing, just letting me lean against him. "I don't know what to do with this," I said finally. "You don't have to do anything," he said. "You can just feel it. And let it pass." I nodded, but it didn't feel that simple. That night, I dreamed again. Not of the wedding. This time, of the swing set. Of Savannah laughing, pushing me higher and higher into the cloudless sky. I woke up crying and didn't know why. The next few weeks passed like a slow ache. I kept working, building the business with Nathan, showing up for my job, living my life the best way I knew how. But the album sat on the bookshelf, a quiet presence that pulled at the corners of my mind. Sometimes I'd find myself glancing toward it without meaning to. As if expecting it to explain something. As if expecting the answers to spill out between the photographs. One Friday afternoon, as I was cleaning up after a meeting at Bellwether, I got another call from my mother. I let it go to voicemail like I had so many times before. But this time, curiosity got the better of me. Her voice was tight, controlled. "Marissa, your sister's not doing well," she said. "She's made mistakes, sure, but she's still your sister. You can't just abandon her forever. Family forgives." There was a long pause at the end, like she wanted to say more but didn't know how. I put my phone down carefully and stared out the window of my office. Forgiveness. Everyone talked about it like it was this beautiful, holy thing, like once you forgave, the hurt just disappeared. But nobody ever talked about what it cost. About the scars left behind, still tender to the touch. Nathan noticed I was quiet that evening. We were eating dinner pasta from the little place down the street, candles flickering on the table. "You heard from her?" he asked gently. I nodded. "Mom said Savannah's not doing well. That I should forgive." Nathan set down his fork. "You don't owe anyone anything, Riss," he said. "Especially not forgiveness. Not if it's just another way to make you small again." I wanted to believe him. But part of me, the part that had been trained since childhood to fix everything, to make it all better, still felt tangled up in guilt. That weekend, it rained for 2 days straight. San Francisco turned gray and blurred around the edges. Nathan had to work late Saturday, so I spent the afternoon wandering the apartment aimlessly, folding laundry I didn't need to fold, wiping down countertops that were already clean. At some point, I found myself standing in front of the bookshelf, staring at the album again. I pulled it down slowly, sat on the floor, and opened it. This time, I let myself really look. I saw the moments we had loved each other, once. Before jealousy and resentment and bitterness had twisted everything. Before we grew up into people who couldn't recognize each other anymore. I closed the album and hugged it to my chest, feeling a deep, hollow ache settle in my ribs. I could miss her. I could mourn the loss. And I could still protect myself. It wasn't an either-or. Sunday morning, I woke up to another text from my mother. Short. Sharper this time. I hope you're happy. No context. No greeting. Just that. I stared at the screen for a long moment before putting my phone face down on the nightstand. Nathan stirred beside me. You okay? He mumbled, half asleep. Yeah, I whispered. Just tired. He wrapped an arm around me, pulling me close, and we stayed that way for a while, listening to the soft hum of the city waking up outside our window. Later that day, we went for a walk down by the water. The air was crisp, the bay glittering under the late morning sun. It felt good to move, to breathe. As we walked, Nathan slid his hand into mine. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm, he said out of nowhere. It stopped me in my tracks. I looked at him and realized he saw it. All of it. The war inside me. The grief, the guilt, the tiny stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, something could still be salvaged. I squeezed his hand and kept walking. I didn't know what came next. I didn't have a neat plan. All I knew was that I was tired of bleeding for people who wouldn't even offer a bandage. It was a few weeks later when Savannah reached out directly. A plain, cautious email. Not a rant, not a sob story, just a few lines. I know I messed up. I want to talk. Please. Just give me a chance to explain. I stared at the screen, feeling nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just an odd, floating calm. Nathan read it over my shoulder. You don't have to answer, he said. But if you do, make sure it's on your terms. I thought about that for a long time. On my terms. It wasn't about yelling. It wasn't about getting an apology I'd never really believe. It was about closing the loop in a way that protected me, not her. So I wrote back, okay. Meet me at 10 a.m. Saturday. At Crema Coffee. Public place. Neutral ground. No excuses. Saturday morning, I wore my best business armor, clean lines, neat hair, nothing emotional. Nathan drove me but stayed outside, giving me space but staying close. I appreciated it more than I could say. Savannah was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, fiddling with a napkin. She looked small. Tired. Her makeup was heavier than usual, but it couldn't hide the new hollowness under her eyes. She jumped up when she saw me. Rish started. I held up a hand. Sit. She obeyed, and that alone told me how different the dynamic was now. I sat across from her, folded my hands on the table, and waited. For a second, she said nothing. Then the words tumbled out, excuses, half apologies, blame wrapped in regret. She said she was jealous. Said she thought I had everything and that she was drowning. That it felt like if she could just have a piece of my life, maybe hers would stop falling apart. She teared up at one point. Real tears, maybe. I wasn't sure anymore. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. I didn't comfort her. When she finally wound down, looking at me with a desperate kind of hope, I leaned forward. You didn't just make a mistake, Savannah, I said, voice low and even. You made a choice. Over and over again. You tried to destroy my life. My career. My wedding. You lied. You impersonated me. You humiliated me. Her lip trembled. You want forgiveness? I asked. Fine. You're forgiven. Her eyes lit up, hope blooming like a stupid flower across her face. But, I continued, sharper now, forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean trust. It doesn't mean I let you back into my life. The hope died in an instant. I stood up, pulling a manila envelope from my bag, and slid it across the table to her. Inside were copies of the police report I had quietly filed after the wedding identity theft, fraud, all the neat legal bows tied tightly. I had decided not to press charges. But it was real. Documented. On record. I didn't pursue it, I said simply. But if you ever contact me again, if you ever interfere with my life again, I will. Immediately. Her face went pale. I straightened my jacket. We're done, Savannah. Then I walked out into the bright morning without looking back. Nathan was waiting by the curb. He didn't say anything, just opened the car door for me. I slid inside, shutting the door on the coffee shop, on Savannah, on that entire chapter of my life. I looked out at the sun climbing higher over the city and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for years. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I just felt free.